Spring is here and the daffodils have been blooming. This is a daffodil. Today we're going to learn how to draw and use colored pencil to color our daffodil. So when we look at our daffodil, we should notice that there are different shapes as part of its design. There's a center circle. It has a ruffly edge. If you look deeper inside, there's another circle that's smaller, and then the pollen is in the middle of that. Let's count the petals. There's 1, 2, 3 big petals that are in the back. 1, 2, 3 smaller petals in the front. They overlap, which means they rest on top of the larger petals that are in the back. 6 petals total. So let's get started. I'm going to put my flower over here in a cup of water. I'm starting with an 8-inch square. Now, what I like to do is draw flowers close up. Georgia O'Keeffe was very famous for that. So as I mentioned, there are 2 circles, a larger circle and a smaller circle. So first I'm going to find the middle of my paper. That's where I'd like to start my flower. So I am going to sketch. Sketch is lightly draw that center circle, then the larger circle around it. Now there's not much space between the two, and sketching is not perfect. It's a bunch of light lines trying to get your shapes right. Now the petals. What I'm going to do is the way that these petals are laid out is in thirds. So if you look at it in terms of that, you'd want to divide your flower into thirds. Now again, this is very light, and you are doing the best you can to make these sections look equal. Notice I'm adjusting them as I go along. Okay, as far as the petals go, I am going to do these small petals first, and if you look at your flower, you'll see that the petal is underneath this circle, but it is in the shape of a teardrop. So here I go. Sketch. Sketch lines, teardrop shape, and I'm going to make them all be the same size. So that's 1 on that line. Now here I go with my second one. Sketch, trying to make them look the same. And my third one, sketch, trying to make them look close to being the same. And I think I did a pretty good job, okay? These 3 larger petals that are in the back, you will only see part of them. So if you go up, I would say half of this small petal from here to here is half, and the same on this side. That's where you could begin. So if we put little marks there, we'll know how big to make these larger petals that are in the back. The other petals are overlapping in the front. These are hidden in the back. So again, teardrop shape. Trying to make them be the relatively same shape and size. Okay, I'm still sketching away here. All right, so I'm going to stop for a minute and adjust my drawing. Let the coloring begin. We all know that daffodils are yellow. Some are very pale. This one happens to have very pale petals and a multicolor yellow and green in the very center, yellow-green cone coming out. So all yellows are not created equal. There's many different color yellows. Some are more gold. This one's more tan. And that one's like a lemon. So I'm going to start with the center so that I don't rub my hand over the petals and smear the coloring that I do there. So I'm using colored pencils. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by making that very center this green color. So I start by not coloring too bright, just sort of a medium value in there, medium value. Okay, now beyond that we got a lemon yellow, I would say, lemon yellow donut. There's also a very bright lemon yellow around the edge here that we have to get this all colored in. Now in between these two bright lemon yellow rings, there's more of a peach. This is something new that I've seen this year, a peachy color on a daffodil. They're normally not peach, like flesh color. So that's where this one comes in, that's more tan. And I'm going to color that in here. Now, if you look at this, you'll notice that there's some areas that are brighter, lighter on this side, and that's because the sunlight is coming from the window that is right next to my table here. So, in order to make that happen, the light and the dark, what you do is you actually will be doing some shading. Shading with, in this case, I'm going to shade with a black, okay, to create more of a darker shadowy middle on this side. Now, I'm not going to spend my whole time doing this because I would like to move on to the petals. Now, you can smear, I like to smear or blend is a better word for the colored pencil to a couple of things. Get pressed into the paper, and also sometimes it creates a shine, which is kind of nice too. And then it blends the black with our peachy color to create a shadow. So in a minute I'm going to go back and finish that whole center area in the middle before I leave. That center part here is nice and bright, and I actually see some orange in that, so I'm going to get the orange. That one is a little too bright, I think. I'm going to get this orange. Get some orange in there. And then we have this piston, I believe that's called, that comes out where the pollen is. Okay, I'll work on that more in a minute. In addition to that, I'm going to be adding some brighter green in here. So I'm going to go back and work on this. to fill this all in to make it look the colors that I see when I look at my actual flower. Now when I go on to, when I'm done with that center, I'm going to go on to the petal area. Now if you notice with the petals, they're very pale pink, yellow. They're not pink. And you'll notice that there's some grayish looking areas. And that's because, again, the sunlight, the light that's passing through is highlighting parts of the petals that are sticking up, that perhaps are flatter, that are getting the direct sunlight, versus areas that are pushed down or folded or more gray or shaded. So in order to get that look, this is what you're going to want to do. You're going to want to use a layers method of introducing the grays into these petals. Now if you notice with the petals, I went back and see some of these petals are cut. That's just, this one's very pointed. I went back and I added those details. If you look, you'll see those details. Flowers are very natural shapes, and they're not always identical in terms of the petal shape. If you look at them close, they're not all identical. So I'm trying to see, you really have to look where the grays are. So if I work on that petal, that's where the grays are there. This petal here has, let's see, a little bit here, a little bit over here. Okay, so to make this look more accurate, at this time I'm going to go back with my yellow. Oops, before I do that, what I'd like to do is to blend this black. So you're going to get your tissue, you're going to put your finger in the tissue, and you're going to rub it to soften, take away the marks that look like the pencil lines. Okay, to soften that. Okay, so notice I'm just working on these two petals here. Alright, so put that down. I'm going to pick my yellow back up now, and I'm going to put my flower down over here in my water, and then I'm going to go back and begin to add the yellow. Now I like to hold my pencil on an angle. Light pressure. You always start with light pressure. That means not pressing down hard. If you press down hard, you're going to get this bright lemon color. Light pressure, because these petals are very light yellow. You could always go back and add more. Make it brighter, lemon yellow color. I try to go in one direction. Okay, now I'm going to blend that with a clean part of my tissue. Press it into the paper, blend it in with the black, or gray in this case. Now you might have to go back and redefine some of these petal edges. These are the ones that are in the front, so they would be more defined than the lighter ones in the back. Okay. Always have an eraser nearby in case you need to fix an error. Brush that off. I'm trying not to rub my hand across the paper. So if you look at the petal again, you'll notice that there's some lighter areas. So for example, this one here has a very light area here and there, and that's because of the sun. So if you just get your eraser, they're the highlights, and erase some of the pencil, you'll easily get those highlights added into your petal. So this one, the highlights are in a different spot. Okay, so I'm going to go back and finish the other petals, finish the center, and then I'll come back. So I finished coloring the flower and blending it with my tissue. The next thing I added was the stem. Obviously, this is a straight line. 2 straight lines like a straw. That's where it sucks up the water. So for this particular stem, I used more of a yellow green and the black, and you could see that there. And the one edge had a highlight, which is that white, so I had taken my eraser and I gently erased a line along the edge to give me that highlight. So this is value, by the way, when we have darks and lights of black and white and of colors. That's value. That's an element of art. So I'm hoping you can see my peach in here, along with my yellow green, a little bit of orange, the bright yellow around the edge with my ruffly lime, and then my lights and darks, grays in the petals. Now you could really spend a lot of time working on getting this exactly right. Art is not done quickly. Sometimes you could begin by getting your idea down quickly, but then you go back and spend quite a bit of time on making it look complete. Notice I was just using my finger, but obviously you can use a napkin tissue to do your blending. I added my highlights with my eraser. You can see a nice highlight here. And I went back with my black and I tried to redefine some of my outlines that I thought were more obvious. Sometimes you have to stand up and back away from your drawing to see where it needs more work and more definition. And I do that quite a bit. And it's definitely good to walk away and then come back. Also ask your families, your friends, what they think of your drawing and get some input. Okay, so I decided, you could see, to add blue as a contrast. Contrast is almost like the extreme opposite. It's not the complement of yellow in this case. Purple is the complement. But I decided to do blue because we're seeing a lot of bright blue skies. So I have 2 different blues that I used. And I started out by coloring. I erased this area over here so I can show you what my process was. I colored with the lighter blue, one direction, not too bright, but medium pressure. I had to go back and do it in a different direction to fill in some of the white, and then again the other way, and that pretty much fills in the white and gives you a nice medium blue value. So you can, this is a robin's egg blue, by the way. You can blend that with your tissue or napkin again, and I took this darker blue and I decided to add some in along the edges. Now, when I did that, I wanted to be very careful not to mess up my flower, so I actually put the napkin down, not worrying getting color on the table. It will wash off, to add in some of that other blue. Now what this does is it gives your background some depth, meaning it looks more three-dimensional because you're starting to create the illusion of space, okay, to show that this flower is gently sitting up in your landscape. Oops, see, I got a little over there on my flower with the sky in the background. So now what I'm going to do is erase that before I continue. Get that off of there. And I'll go back with some yellow. Okay, so now I'm going to get to a clean part on my tissue and I'm going to blend this in with two blues, and if you notice, I did that around the whole flower, and that starts to give it some illusion that it's in space. So have a nice time drawing your daffodil and coloring it in, and enjoy.